going on, Drew?
Hey, not much.
I know you've got a microphone over there. Your voice is just as warm as it is. And there it is. That's right. I've got one of these suckers now. It's not even the model that I wanted, yet it's just such a vast improvement over the nothing that I had previously that I'm happy with it.
Were you talking into directly into your laptop before?
I was talking into the back of my Mac Mini before, which I don't know is
Oh.
as good as a laptop.
That's right.
Let's see here. So
Did I respond to you today on Slack?
Check it out. I think there's a record of that if you did.
Probably, yes.
Yeah, there's no response there.
Okay.
But if you're good with her, we'll
Yeah.
All right. I'll send her an email after a call or something like that, sometime this week anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, glad you signed up. Ozzy went out and he went, most people are going through the forum to find a mentor, and Ozzy just went right to Glenn Allen, just a real direct way. It said, Glenn, I want you. I loved that. Oh, it was great.
That's good.
And also Ozzy signed up twice on the training forum, just thorough, just real enthusiasm. So Ozzy, we're talking as if you can hear, and if you can,
hi guys.
say hello. Hi. We're going to go through some Three.js stuff tonight. And it's a library that I'm not super familiar with. It's a library that I've been asked to do a project in. And I said I could either exchange an artist's time for money or software development hours. And he picked software development hours. So I have a project now. I've got to build a 3D garage that can be interacted with a keyboard. So that'll be sort of the foundation. Now, as well, Ozzy, you're not going to do the Spanish language talk tonight, and that's fine enough. But I was wondering if you gave a Spanish language talk to folks that didn't know Spanish, would that be enjoyable? So I have a friend who does speak Spanish who I thought would be able to make it. He couldn't make it this time yet. I'll try again for it next time.
Okay.
Oh. Another minute. All right. So I've just got a message from the artist saying he's going to join in a minute or two. So I'm going to wait until he's on so we can just talk at a fast point about that, and then we'll get into it. That sound good to you both?
Peter,
Yep.
quick question.
Yeah, what's up, Ozzy?
I just want to know, is this artist part of your network?
Well, I know him.
Nice. Do you know many artists in New York City?
I do.
Wow.
It's not like, you know, you go down New York City and you throw a rock, you'll hit an artist. Sort of the world, and I enjoy art myself, and I think it's as rewarding a way of creating to do software as it is to do I don't know, drawing or any of y'all have any skills that are not software?
I know how to cook.
That counts, and I cannot do that, so that's pretty good.
Cooking, a little bit of painting, writing, that kind of stuff.
How about drawing?
No.
Okay.
I cannot draw figures or most anything else. It's a goal.
When you talk about painting, you're not talking about house painting. You're talking about more artistic style.
Yeah.
Right on.
Largely abstract and that sort of thing.
Right on. You'll have to try to rectify how you can do code and art. And everybody who does, just, I don't know. I don't think it's ever been anything that I grew up believing. Like as a programmer, you could be quite good at art. And it's almost more the case that programmers that I know that are enjoyable to converse with, to be around, they've all got something going on that's a little less logical. It's a little more. I mean,
Yeah, you kind of need a break from doing that 8 to however many hours a day.
Yeah, and Lord knows that 8 can be the low end.
Right.
Okay, let's see. I can see that Wyatt has joined. Assuming that you're able to say hello, Wyatt, why don't you say hello?
Okay. Hi, everybody. How's it going? Thank you, Peter, for inviting me to sit in this evening.
Glad to have you on. So as I was explaining it, that and I've seen the skull getting eaten with the eyeball. That today's talk is about getting started with Three.js, with the idea that you took me up on an offer to do a software project that I'm now committed to. So the two others that are on now, Ozzy and Drew, if you'd like to just say hello, introduce yourself for 30 seconds, and then Wyatt, you can do the same, and I'll do the same in the end.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Drew. I work here at Syracuse for college sports website company.
All right. Hi, my name is Ozzy, but my real name is Ahmed, as you can see in the screen. But anyway, I love to code. I'm just beginning, and I love to cook and draw.
Yep.
Very nice. Am I up, Peter?
Yes.
My name is Wyatt. I live in Brooklyn. I've lived here for 7 years. I met Peter through my roommate, Dan. They grew up together. I went to college with Dan. I love to play music, draw, make art, write. I sell real estate in the city and have for the last 10 years or so.
Nice.
And I love cars, and that is about it.
Cool. I'm Peter. I do software and some other stuff good too. Let's do a quick screen share here to see what we're getting into. Three.js is the library in question. You can click on any of these that are up on their homepage and just presume that this is some of what is good in the world of three. So as I look at this one, I'm seeing rotating something or other. It's loading, so not even at the point where we've got anything cool quite yet.
Wow.
But now it says click, and there's an eyeball. So let's see what happens. We zoom in. Now it's saying to scroll. So we're seeing this whole interface is based on, I'm scrolling now. All I'm doing on my wheel, contact a human editor. That's great. Developers on Slack. And this is a 3D little world that they've made. Great. Hubs, that's more involved than we're going to get into. Something called Beat Saber, and we're just seeing a demo here of a 3D interface that's being manipulated using Three.js. Ready Player Me, this is all about what does it look like, personal avatars. And let's see, Centigene Solutions, loading. I'm going to presume that it didn't start loading until I went to it. Let's see. All right, revolutionizing. We're already seeing a large DNA spline there. It's rotating. So all this on the right here is just Three.js. We're seeing models that are in response to scroll moving. See how that pill's going and leaving. Some more stuff. This is all cool. And we're at the end. Let's get into how do we get started with it. Getting started, Three.js. This is one of the more popular libraries. I'm going to see if we've got a GitHub link to check any of the just popularity of it. Let's see what we've got. None of these things get too far without going to GitHub. So, there we go. Yeah, 66,000 stars forked 26,000 times. That means that about 26,300 people have taken this bit of code and tried to make it their own. There have been 36444 individual contributions. There's currently 400 plus outstanding issues. There's currently 100 plus requests to make update to the code. It looks like it's active. It was pushed to about an hour ago. This is not for the weak-hearted. This is a strongly developed library here. And the documentation looks good. Creating a scene. Before we start, before you can use, you need to display it somewhere. Save the HTML to your computer along with a copy of Three.js in the JS directory. So here is Three.js. Let's go in and let's call this project garage. cd into it. Make an index HTML file. What do we call this one? Three.js. Make a Three.js file. Let's go open up the code editor and then have a time doing this. We'll put this into a folder called JS. All right, now we've got all of our code loaded and saved. And let's take that little bit there from the beginning, copy that in. All right, so we've got an empty script tag. We've got a delay in the saving because at 38,000 lines, my prettier editor wants to make it all clean according to its own opinion, but we're in it. Creating a scene. To display something, we need scene, camera, and renderer so we can render the scene with a camera. So it looks like we've got a scene that we're getting in, a camera that we're getting in, and a renderer getting in. So let's see about putting that right in. I'm going to run a simple server, let's say Python, to get us going on localhost 8000. Let's see what we got. Black, but that's not the default, so that's a cool little step. So what's going on? We get something called a perspective camera. It has a field of view, has an aspect ratio, and then there's something called near and far clipping plane. What it means is that objects further away from the camera and near won't be rendered. Don't worry about it now. All right, I won't. So where's a cube? Let's see if we can do a cube just by copying this in. Looks like that's going to be related to the camera. Looks like there's some geometry. Looks like the scene add happens to add a cube. Looks like the renderer happens there. We'll see if the order matters. Might have to restart the dev server. I think the order does matter. So let's try to have this happen where up here, doesn't seem like anything happens with our renderer. We just say that we attach the renderer after setting up what we set up. Still no cube. All right, so we got to do some reading. Oh, maybe it's this animate function. There, look at that. We've got a cube. And it doesn't look quite 3D. So we've got to animate it. So we can add the following right above the renderer.render in the animate function. Now our cube rotates. This is a beginning of 3D objects in Three.js. Let's have a look and pause on what we do and do not know about it. So there is a class that's available to us that's a global called 3 that comes from the Three.js file. And it appears like all of what we do is going to be based on properties of that class and methods of that class. 3.scene, perspective camera, box geometry, basic material, mesh, WebGL renderer, all of them are particular to 3. There is a request animation frame function being called here. And with that, it is not, if you wanted to say often used, yet it is part of the Mozilla MDN documentation. It's available right on the window. It tells the browser that you wish to perform animation and requests that the browser calls a specified function to update an animation before the next repaint. It takes a callback as an argument to be invoked before the repaint. So our request animation frame takes the animate function. The animate function gets called. So what we can see is we've got a recursive function here handling the animation. That means it's just never going to end. It's always going to go call the function animate and then call animation frame, update a couple of properties on the cube and render, and then do it again and again and again and again. We've got some values here of 0.1. Let's see what happens when we refresh. Goes a little faster. Let's see if we go the other way with it. Goes way a bit slower. So by reducing or increasing the addition and reassignment of the values on the X and Y rotation and then reanimate it, that's how we get our effect. If we only animate the X, I bet we just get, there you go. If we only animate the Y, well, now we're only going over the Y. So this is the beginning of manipulating 3D objects using only code and as well using a renderer and so on and so on. Have we got any comments or questions at this point? Okay. It's well and good to go through documentation, and we've got a strong documented library here. So what one of the requirements of the project is that we can render some real files exported from a program called Blender. So we go to Blender, so anybody here who's not aware can be aware. It is a 3D animation rendering tool. It looks like we've got some people that build cool things with it, and on the call, Wyatt is one of them. Has anybody here done anything previously with Blender or 3D? Just I'm asking really Drew or Ozzy, I suppose.
No, I have not.
Not in a very, very long time.
What did
On
you
like
do?
3D Studio Max in the early 2000s. Or probably mid 2000s.
Okay. Pretty cool though. Is that something that you were doing professionally or is it personally?
Personally.
Cool. All right.
Didn't
We wanna
make it
get-
much further than building polygons.
So what I'm doing right now is I'm looking up an OBJ library. What we need to do is be able to take something from the Blender export, and that might be an OBJ file ultimately. So while we don't have one available at the moment, we can find some sample and try to use that in our project. So we've got some textures here. We've got an OBJ file. I'm just gonna take this OBJ throw it into our project here, whatever that looks like. We're just going to call it book.obj. It uses centimeters and so on. And then let's see what we can do about loading obj and how that might look in reality. So this is a simple data format that has 3D geometry in a human readable format. The position of the vertex, the UV, the texture, normals, and the faces, etc. So if we can take this here, we can start to manipulate it. So let's go back to the browser. We can probably remove some of the stuff. Let's see what we got. Okay, we've got the idea that we need to load the OBJ file. I think we're going to load it right from the same level as the HTML. So we're going to say that's going to be book.obj. Function called on the successful load is the callback here to the loader.load function. The loader is coming from the obj loader 2, and I don't know that that's actually a real thing or if we've got to include it off of there. So let's say obj. Yeah, it looks like it might be. Let's see, can we get any typehead stuff? No, not quite. Well, we'll see what happens. I'm going to just think that it's going to be exported as a method because everything else is. Then we got this loader load that loads the callback on load, which adds something to the scene. So we're going to keep the camera. I don't think we need the cube and the material and all this. I don't think that we need the animate as well. So let's see where we get to when we get to this. Looks like there might be an error. We got a white screen for the first time. Three.obj is not a constructor. How about obj loader 2? Maybe it does export another top level. Obj is not defined. Okay. So let's see what we got. But the new obj loader is a simple example according to their code. Let's see what they do. So from the start, they're using a different level of, we'll just call it quality from their perspective of including modules and so on. But what we might find is that the Three.js does not, as a default, export the obj loader. So it might be that we've got to work on that. So they have this example prototype that they go through and the depth of that, and then the resize, and then an app init, and all those other things. So let's just see about going to GitHub and trying to get an obj loader out of the source code somewhere. All right. So let's see, do we have a build? Great. 3.module. It's 1 megabyte. If we did it that way, what would we get? And again, Three.js. Again, 1 megabyte. Let's go into our Three.js and see what we got. There's nothing in here on obj loader 2. So we are missing something. So with that said, let's go to the code of the example and look if there's some way we can use that. We've got our examples, we've got files, JS, JSM, cameras and lines, and oh, this is good stuff. Okay. So instead of going about our own handmade route, let's go through their professional example route. Go into the code, go to the new GitHub CLI, and I've been enjoying this one, and take that as a clone. So I'm going to leave the garage. I'm going to go into the community folder where I keep all of the just Git stuff that I work with. We got a large package here. It looks like it's many megabytes. And I'm going to pause a moment and stop sharing the screen and we can discuss. So Ozzy, you have a question in there. Is this being recorded for a later review? Nobody's going to watch it. It's basically for us.
Oh, so can I record?
Well, it is being recorded. I'll put it out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, let's not bother at all.
Cool. Thanks.
Well, that's good. So one of the requirements, Wyatt, is manipulation. And I want to believe that as you had written it originally, it was manipulation with buttons on screen. Having seen quite a bit now of what Three.js usage looks like, folks are doing it with a keyboard. They're doing scrolling as well, kind of mouse movement and so on. You're muted if you are speaking. We just can't hear it.
So it seems like it's open-ended movement versus like one or two control points, buttons that get you around.
Yeah, just in looking at it, it looks like the keyboard can be used like left and right arrows can give you a little bit like open world exploration sort of feel like you might have had in Super Mario or something like that, where it was Super Mario 64 anyway. But,
Nice.
Yeah, that's even better.
it is. I was wondering about it. If you would think that with control points, you might be able to more simply do things if you've got a car, like open a trunk by having a little circle, just click this and it goes open, you know? Let's see.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Okay, we've got our thing cloned down. I'm gonna open this up. I'm gonna go to master and we're gonna do an npm install. While that's happening, I'm gonna go and find that examples. Great. We were in WebGL loader like that. So it's all just here. So I should do that same Python simple server and I do this here and then that loads up. Then it says it cannot find the build. And we'll see if we can get there. See how we can figure out how to fix that up. And all right, so that's loaded like that. Anybody have experience with JSM?
What is it called, Peter?
JSM.
What's JSM?
I think it stands for something like JavaScript modules.
Oh, JSM.
Oh, we'll see what we can do. We got all of these WebGL things, and it's looking for something in a directory called build.jsm. So let's go to our code, find the appropriate package, and explore. All right, so it's looking for something called build. So JSM strings must use single quote. That's no bother at all. But here we go, JSM. It looks like there's all of our files. And now it's got this reference to a build. So we're gonna stop that from being in the root. I'm gonna move that build. To be right where we're at. See if that does anything for us. That's nice. Here we are. Now we've got the ability to click and drag and move around. See what happens. That's about it. It's click and drag. I just tried with the keyboard and haven't gotten that. Now our next challenge is to get our friend here in her heels to transform into a book as shown here. So let's see about how that can work out. We have our WebGL 2. We have an object build. It's this MTL file that I'm somewhat familiar with in combination with OBJ. It seems like people tend to export from Blender using those two as the combination. So they've got some model name here, and then here we go, models and the models object folder. And that's promising. So let's go to models. Let's go to OBJ. And let's go to make a new one where we'll call it book. So female 2 has a number of images along with the OBJ file. So we might be able to find some success here. Here is our OBJ. Here are some book textures. Let's try to put our book textures in here. Try to put our book obj in here. Great, great. I am seeing them use this material loader here, and they've got in their female 02 directory a MTL file. I'm not seeing one of these here, and I don't know that that matters or not well enough to speak to it. It says features, there's a Maya binary. Wyatt, Maya is an alternative to the Blender tool.
Exactly. Yes.
Got it. All right. So we can do with just the book OBJ. It doesn't seem to, let's see if at any point in here does it reference those image files, and it doesn't. It's just all numbers. So I'm not convinced that these images are going to do anything for us in this example, but we'll have to just play that out. So our only option appears to be to just go and do book.obj. And let's see what happens if we also change the model name to book.obj. And then we've got our example running. We do a refresh. Look at that. We got a book.
Oh, wow. That is cool.
We can zoom in on our book. We don't have any texture. And I'm wondering about that MTL file as being the missing link. Let's look up what MTL extension means.
Material.
All right. That's what it is and how do I open it? Material settings file used by 3D object editing, such as, well, there's a number of them here. So it talks about how to apply textures, and then MTLs contain the name of our bitmaps. So clearly we are, well, you want to believe that there's a material file to be had somewhere on the internet. So I'm wondering about, look at that, free 3D models, Blender, old bookshelf, obj, and an FBX. We're going to find ourselves some examples. Three.js, OBJ, MTL. I know what. I was looking up something for how to use Three.js with Angular, which is a framework that I'm familiar with, and there was a template for it. And I think the developer here is going to have some MTL files for us to play with. Here's our obj loader. We've got some model path. We've got something called base material file. So let's see if we can do some finding in this project for a material, assets, model, smiley. Here we go. 3 years ago, our friend here provided us with a smiley. I want to see what that smiley looks like. So I also don't want to see it until it's in 3D. So I'm going to try to find a way to make that happen. Let's do what we just did previously, doing our clone using the CLI. Let's go and have that happen. And I'll do the screen share on. I don't think it's going to be quite so lengthy as it was last time. Okay, so then we go into our Angular template. And then we've got our, let's go to MV. We want to go to our source, our assets, our model, our smiley. We want to move that over to our Three.js examples, our model directory, our obj directory, and we want to create a new one. So let's call it smiley. All right. And then we look up the name on that. I'm going to believe that we get a smiley pretty fast here. So just looking up the source, assets, model, smiley. It's easy. A smiley MTL, smiley OBJ. So we change our smiley here and there. And we change our smiley here and here. Got our server running. And look how on this screen we've got a friend. Hello.
Oh,
Yeah.
Floating in space, we've got a smiley. All
That looks like a fun toy. You can do a lot with that toy.
Yeah, this is some, this is it. So here we are now.
Peter, how many steps are between, like, is the most practical application for your work, for any of you guys' work, that a client comes to you and says, I want a website with this object that people can like fuck around with?
Yeah, probably. Not a lot of people
And-
are doing it. There's not a lot of enterprise software development where they're looking for us to do 3D stuff. And we focus at Upstate Interactive on that sort of bit. Or what I might
And what
say,
does that mean, enterprise software development?
a company has 5,000 people, they need to manage their expenses, they want to do it in a custom way, so they ask us to build something that's Expensify, it's just custom for them.
Okay.
It's a lot to do with business process improvement and less to do with fun smiley toys.
Got it.
But if you have a desire to try to understand how this might fit into a business world, I could imagine that many clients would be curious about this type of thing. And it's just that none have come to me yet for it.
And they would be like, okay, we want to figure out how to make our business run smoother and keep track of our numbers and stuff, but have some sort of interactive element that somehow engages us or engages someone in doing that.
Yeah, you know, there's a great
interesting.
advisor on my company board whose company here is ThoughtBot. And ThoughtBot did something nice with 3D stuff. I don't know if they feature it on their website anymore. They did a martial arts thing, and it was all models of martial arts moves that were done using 3D. So companies like DigitalOcean are great. Education and learning. Martial Codex is the name of it. Let's get a Martial Codex, see a demo. Okay. So here we're seeing what appears to be video-like. And now we're seeing, oh, and I'm getting audio in my it's telling me and narrating through this animation what it is. So Wyatt, here's a practical business application for some 3D stuff.
So what is this specifically? Yeah, what is this company's business where this is the practical application for it? Marshall,
Study through 3D motion capture lessons.
So Peter, would this be similar to the strength training and athleticism app that you're working on that Dan has showed me? Like if you had some sort of body that facilitated the people's fitness regimens, would this be similar to that?
Yeah, I
If
don't
not
get into.
identical?
Well, I don't get into that a lot because if I go to YouTube and I do, let's see, planche anatomy might be something that's close to it. There's a video I've never clicked on. Here it is. You see a 3D model there, or at least some sort of drawing of a model. Hey, look, 1 million people have wanted to see this. And yeah, it looks like it is just sort of static drawing like you might see in a textbook. But then it does get into a real person doing it. And for one reason or another, they decided over on the Marshall side, they didn't want a real person. They wanted a 3D model. Maybe that's a cool thing that people aren't doing, and it could be something.
That is really cool.
So, Ed Deaver, nice to see you in. I'm gonna assume that you can say hello at some point, and whenever you're able, we'll be happy to hear and chat.
Yeah,
So-
can you hear me?
Oh, it's soft. I can. It's just like you're a mile away from that microphone. Ed, I assure you, at the point where it's possible to hear you at any volume, that will, you'll be in on the conversation. So if you find the need to, or the ability to raise that microphone, well, that'd be great. Drew, we just did a little bit of coding. What do you think?
As far as
How about performance? I haven't actually looked at the size of an OBJ file that we just downloaded, but I'm wondering what you might think about how to render large scenes and have them be performant.
that, I wouldn't know too much about. One of the things when I was looking through the gallery that they have on Three.js, it's pretty taxing on my poor old computer.
The-
I'm not sure what could be done about that.
Do you mean that as you just had it loaded up, that it was not smooth animation? It just felt in that way?
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know if it's something with Mac and OpenGL drivers or something, but it wasn't particularly.
Maybe I'm not going
Smooth.
on any real facts here. I'm just imagining that a Mac is going to be pretty well suited for 3D, just with its history in the world of, Pixar and things like it. Not sure though. I am looking at this the smiley file, and our smiley there, the OBJ was 162 KB, and the MTL was less than a KB, it was 600 or 765 bytes, and then the JPEG was 9 kilobytes. Let me show that because it's curious, because we all just saw what it rendered. So here we have our smiley OBG and our metal and our or material anyway. And then because there was colors, you might assume that the JPEG had some of that. This is all the JPEG is. So it's our material file that has some intelligence about rendering some of the additional colors that we saw. We know that the OBJ is basically point maps from the book. So all the JPEG is doing is this part here, and everything else is in the material and the OBJ.
Is that a procedural versus declarative distinction?
I'm not sure what you mean by either of those words.
My understanding is that something that's procedural. Sorry, go ahead.
Please.
In some limited stuff that I've read about computing and in the theory of intelligence, procedural is like something that's being, you can't specifically locate that intelligence, like knowing how to walk or speak a language, whereas declarative is something you could very specifically locate, like a image file that a polygon is calling on to represent the smiley face, or the date that a treaty was signed that I have in my memory.
This is all declarative then.
All declarative.
Yeah, we could easily look and see inside this this MTL file, and if you look at the length of it, while I personally am too new to this to know exactly what these mean, I believe that it is decipherable. So Wyatt, if you see here that we've got some numbers, I'm just going to start messing with some of them, taking things that are 1 in the leftmost column and bump them all up. And when I change that, let's see what happens to our object. Looks like the things got a little, I don't know, they actually look very similar to me. Let's keep going. Let's take a larger approach. This one's got 30 going on for it. So let's go to 20 on all of that. Let's go to 20 on this. Okay, it looks like we might be seeing the same thing again. Let's keep going.
Right, yeah.
Let's do 40. Oh, yeah, 400. Well, I'll also refresh the load on the metal material. Not sure that really mattered. Let's go up to 400. 300 here. This is talking about different various arcs. And then up here we've got our sphere. I gotta believe that we're manipulating well, there's more going on here. We got these little spheres there too. Arc 1, arc 1. What happens if we remove one of these? Oh, that's why. Again, the material is all about color.
Okay, the color.
And what we were looking for there was a difference in the size, or at least that's what I was looking for. It's all the color. There we go. So this is some type of declarative color pattern there. Well,
so Drew and Peter, can you guys clarify what you were talking about? Peter, you asked about the performance, and you guys were talking about these things being taxing, and I'm curious what is taxing who? Like, is it if you're browsing one of these files on a web browser that things are slow, or if you're accessing it via the computer? Tell me more about that.
Drew, maybe you want to share your screen on the example that you had. Pull up developer console, see if we can see the file size of what's being loaded. That may be something that's illustrative.
So specifically, what I was referring to is I navigated out to the same project that we looked at the beginning with the black screen with the sort of glowy female character.
Yeah.
And on my screen, that was just the movement and the scrolling down through the various other scenes was particularly wasn't super responsive. I could.
So where's the lag coming from in that case?
That I don't know.
Generally, where lag can happen assuming that the computer is capable of doing solid processing. So I'm just speaking to the idea that the computer is good and then we're delivering it over the web. There is in the world of web development a number of calls to get the data. You've always got to get data. It doesn't stay on your computer like a application does. So it's
Yeah.
served.
So it's a network issue.
Yeah, it can be very many times a network issue. It can be just some practical limitations. If you've got to load a lot of data, you can have the best network and it's still a lot of data. So maybe it's just there's a lot of data issue. Netflix is like 33% of the web traffic because they push around a lot of data, just high def video and so on and so on. So if you've got a slow connection, you get a slower or a lesser quality of video. If you've got a fat connection, you get the 4K version. And if you don't have a fat connection, then you get the HD version. And if you don't have that, then you get the SD version, all so that it can continue based on your network to deliver you a show that's just second by second without it having to pause and buffer and so on and so on. So there's mitigation strategies at network at the network level. So.
But you're saying that the lag that Drew is experiencing could be some combination of network and the computer, or it's only network related?
Oh, it could be both. Yep.
Okay.
So Wyatt, I think if you recall, you sent me one export, and that export that you sent me was 10 megabytes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was where I didn't actually get to open it up and view it. So what we'll need to see if in the new export that you send with is a OBJ and a material of that identical thing, is it less? And if it is, then we've already made an improvement to the performance of the application just on the idea that we're starting with less data.
Okay.
There's more to it as well. If we design this thing such that it's the whole world all at once, that presumes that the user is going to have all that data available to them from the beginning. And if you remember on those early examples, they had loading indicators going on in the beginning. All those loading indicators are getting those objects that you don't yet see. And then they go away after all the object data is loaded. So then it's the idea of, well, should it be really fast and we just load one at a time and they only see one at a time? Or do we take a minute and just say, we're going to load all this up, be patient. You're going to like what you're going to get later, but you got to be patient. So there's a little bit of that going on.
Okay. Yeah, I'll export. I owe you that OBJ, so I'll just as an experiment, I'll export that right now, and we'll just see what size looks like compared to the MTL.
Yeah, if you can see what size it is, and you can email it over to me, we can load it up right now. See if we can get it in the browser and play with it.
Let's get it going.
All right.
Export OBJ.
Drew, have you ever done anything with Git LFS?
No, I haven't. I've been yelled at before that some of my files are too big and that it would be good if I put them in there, but that's about it.
Well, why it's challenged me with is how are we going to manage the update of these material and OBJ files from the perspective of Wyatt not having the direct access to some of the things that a web developer might in terms of storing and sharing files. And so one thought that I had was, well, Git LFS, but it's kind of esoteric. I don't think that people, it might just be we find like an Amazon S3 bucket and forget the versioning control. We'll just plunk a new one with the same name and that'll be that.
Yeah, I think that would be a way to do it. Or even a shared Dropbox folder or something along those lines, depending on how complex or simple.
Wyatt, you got a lot of viewers overseas?
Do I have a lot of viewers overseas? Not yet, but I plan to. So
Yep.
What are we going to do?
Well, it's meaningful.
And so what did that question speak to, Peter, about of the overseas part? What does that mean?
We've got data centers here in the USA. They've got data centers everywhere on the planet. And there are options when you've got data like you've got of keeping it all over the globe and accessible all over the globe. There's some associated cost with that as well. And what it means is if you've got data here in a US data center and you're in the UK, you're going to get that data, it'll load. It'll just take the time that it takes for that data to transfer to the UK from the US. And if you've got regular viewers in the UK, well, then you start getting into just save the data over there as well. We'll keep it in the US and the UK. And that way the UK people can get it just as fast as it takes to go from London to Edinburgh. And we're talking about a briefer data transfer. You get higher performance.
Interesting. I just sent you that OBJ.
Cool. Let's see. Is that in my email?
That is in your email.
See if we can get that loaded up. All right, so I am awaiting the OBJ at the moment. Looks like I've got something called a garage OBJ. So that's an 11 megabyte download, and that's as we can say just compared to our Smiley case, is probably about 20 times as large as our Smiley case. So this will load up, and I'll start to share my screen, by the way. Let's see what we can do for that. We go to our share screen. Got that garage OBJ. We're going to make a new directory here called garage. Throw it up like that. Let's find where in the code we had our Smiley before. Change that all to garage. Knowing we're not going to have a material, I don't want to cause any errors there, so I'm not going to change that. Let's go here and go to garage. And let's take that new folder. Here's our garage there. Here's our garage object. Put it in place. And now refresh. There we go.
Oh, yeah.
Now we're scrolling. We got some cars. Let's talk about performance for a second. We can do something with this. If I can open up my developer console. Window, let's see. Developer. JavaScript console. All right, so this is on my local network. So that basically means it doesn't get any faster than this. There is no network issue. It's just available locally. And there's going to be some load speed associated with it. So we can see that most of, if we look at this little chart over here, the load locally is coming from the garage OBJ file. And when it's available locally, we can see a couple of things. It takes into the microseconds for the request to be sent. It takes as much as 17 milliseconds of just waiting. And then locally, we're at 988 milliseconds to get that download. And that's, well, we're talking about 988 milliseconds and it's right here. Let me see if I can do a push bullet. And if I do a push bullet, that's going to make it available on the web. And it may be possible, it may not be, just depending on how push bullets file limits are.
So Peter, what do those numbers mean to you about the nature of this OBJ?
It's large.
Okay, that was the sense I was getting.
Yep. It is just larger than you would be able to promote a content-based website on. So if you had to just get somebody's phone number and it took you 100 of, pardon me, if it took you 988 milliseconds to just get that, that would be a problem. Now, on the other side of it, you're not really trying to do that. You're not doing an SEO optimized site. You don't need millions of people to see it. You just need the people that you've told this is cool to be able to see it.
I definitely need millions of people to see this, so I'm gonna have to make some. I'm gonna have to make some changes.
We can work on that. All right. Let's see if we can get this to load just by changing the URL to be from the link there. It may work, it may not. Okay. So now it's coming from the internet. It's coming from the push bullets. And I'm going to imagine that it's just using Amazon under there. Garage, OBJ failed. What did it fail for? Request URL, etc. Console. Yeah. It's not available from the perspective of cores. Drew, any creative thoughts on how to get this OBJ to be available? I'm not sure if we got through, but maybe we can get something like a quick express server or something up. Oh, but that wouldn't do any good because it would again be local on my computer. All right. Well, that comes to the end of the exploration on network performance, unless anybody's got something late in the game here that they want to add in. That'll probably also be just about the end of tonight's call. Drew, I see your lips moving, but I can't hear you. You're muted.
To bring it back to hardware performance, so there was a combination of things on my computer that was causing frames to drop and running at a lower FPS than it probably ought to have been. One was my browser was running in software rendering. So it was trying to render all of the 3D just on top of everything that was running on my computer. Versus I set it to hardware rendering and it's specifically using the graphics card. That sped it up and dropping fewer frames. And then the other issue is that the canvas is sort of huge if you're running it full screen and
What's the
shrinking
size
it.
of your monitor?
It's 1080p, the monitor that I'm viewing it on.
Yeah.
So at full HD, it was causing frames to drop still and run at a lower FPS, but shrinking the window down sped it up to where it should be performance-wise. So I think there's just something with the way that Open or WebGL interacts with hardware, graphics card, in-memory rendering, all that sort of stuff is a little bit probably tricky.
I can't believe that I've ever messed with the software versus hardware acceleration for my graphics. Is that something that you have done previously? Is that something you regularly modify? Just to say that I'm on a Mac and I don't know that I've ever even particularly known that that option was available.
It is an option in Chrome, whether Chrome is allowed to use
One,
hardware versus software rendering.
Oh, sorry. Can I share a thought?
Go ahead.
Sure.
I was just want to say when I was working on my A+ certification, building computers and whatnot, I came across overclocking the CPU and the GPU. And, it does great for performance like 3D rendering and, all sorts of things on a PC. I've never done anything on I'm sorry, on any other machine.
Sure.
Did you find it straightforward to do the overclocking when you did it?
No, it took a lot of studying.
All right.
What does that mean, overclocking?
Overclocking means that when you enter the PC, it gives you a blue screen. And when you enter the settings, it gives you a choice to overclock the clock on the computer, on the memory. And when you do that, it updates everything faster.
Okay.
I can crystallize a number for you. Have you ever heard that when you buy a piece of computer hardware that it has some type of processor speed denominated like 3.4 gigahertz?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's limited by the manufacturer And it's like taking off that limiter to get yourself up to 3.7 gigahertz when you overclock.
Mhm.
This is something that is probably a performance improvement that you're taking a risk with because more heat is involved. People buy heat sinks in order to do that.
Yeah.
Drew, in Chrome, is it by default software or hardware accelerated?
That I don't know. I had it off. I may have turned it off in the past. You can, if you have a Chrome handy, you can open up
Yeah, Chrome handy.
settings
Okay, go to Chrome settings, sure.
and then just do a search for hardware rendering or hardware. There you go, hardware acceleration, whatever else. So apparently it's on by default if you've never messed with it.
No.
Occasionally, like that can run into certain issues where it eats battery life,
Oh, yeah.
which is probably why I turned it off at some point in the past. But
Cool. Ed Deaver, I wish that we had some audio from you so we could have you be an active participant. On the other end of it, as a passive participant, you're really just like 100% cool. Well, we got to hang out a little bit longer because we did get Ryan Gauss just joining now. So let's see if he says hello. And
Hi, hello.
Ryan, Three.js, you know about it?
I do.
What?
I've used it before. Actually, I was working on something over the holiday break where I was making I made a Perlin noise generator, and I got a Three.js to draw like a mesh of all the vertices that I generated with the Perlin noise and like plot it in like a low poly landscape. That was pretty fun.
You able to show that?
I don't think it's in a good state to be shown right now, unfortunately. I was
Go on.
I was working on it, and my next kind of thing was I wanted to add water, where the water would like I over all points in the landscape, I'd generate like a fixed thin layer of water, and then write an algorithm to cause that water to like flow to all the low points to form lakes. And it's like kind of broken right now because of that whole thing.
Are you using any external models or are you doing it all with the code?
All with code.
Our conversation tonight is centered around the idea that on this call is Wyatt Bertz, an artist who's got 3D models that are going to be rendered in the browser. And what we're seeing here is as far as we've come in doing that. So these are some cars that he's done in a application called Blender. And we've taken some of the Three.js examples and made it so that we can load the models. And as a matter of that, in our network tab, when we're loading locally, we've got a garage OBJ file whose performance characteristics look like 200 milliseconds, 270 milliseconds this time, and that's running locally. Previously, we'd seen it come in at around, this is the first load, about a second, and again, that's locally. The file itself is about 10 megabytes for this year. And it may be the case that if we start adding on textures and start adding in some of the details and make these cars what they are, like the accurate color profile and if there's any insignia, and we're starting to get up to quite the payload.
What if you gzip it? Would that help?
I can imagine that it might, yeah.
I don't know how unique the data is. Like, would zipping it help that size much?
That's a good thought. And are people on the planet doing that generally? It's probably a good way to know about that.
Yeah, I mean, how much control do you have over loading the object? Can you give it like a binary stream, or is it you just like giving it a URL to fetch?
At the moment, we've only done the URL to fetch approach. So it's basically, here it is. And this is not code that's been written by anybody on this call. This is basically pulling from the Three.js WebGL example for OBJ2. And so exploring binary stream, sure.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, two things worth maybe trying then, I guess. If one, I mean, you could just gzip it and send it over, and if you could get that binary stream in, that would work. But also, I know at work I was doing this where if you send the right headers in the browser will decode the gzip for you. So you might be able to, if you gzip it and serve it with the right headers coming off of the local server, it might just work as is.
So you're thinking about in a network situation where this is all live and deployed, use the gzip to get it locally in a compressed way, and then the headers, when it arrives, will make it available as the regular file type.
Yeah, so we were doing this in the context of a really large bundle for a web application. We were able to upload it to S3 and give it some sort of special metadata that sets some headers. I don't really know that part exactly, but effectively it sent over the headers, and the browser was able to decode the gzip automatically, just with the script in the script tag.
Was it a binary file then?
No, it was just JavaScript. But
Oh.
I mean, the same sort of idea. The browser's making a request, and the data it's using, it's getting back for that script tag was decoding that automatically. So
Cool.
maybe something worth trying. I don't know.
That's very cool. A lot of the examples that we saw at the beginning of the call where folks are loading a lot of data, they throw up a loading spinner.
That works too.
Yeah.
At that point, you're just kind of treating it like an old Flash application. You just have a preloader, and when it's done, you can access it.
Yeah. Well, there's some clever techniques that people use, like preloading, to trick the user, to trick the person into thinking they're getting something performant. You show a little, 500 kilobyte object up front, play with that for a moment while we load everything else behind the scenes.
Huh.
And
Clever.
Wyatt, that might look like you can create a single standalone garage door that's relatively simple. And then the user can see that garage door, and that garage door can load fast. It can be less than a megabyte. And when they see that, continuing behind that is the whole garage. And it's identical in concept to a loading indicator, with the idea that for the user, it looks a little bit like they're already getting what they're meant to get, and it builds the load into the experience.
That is very cool. And Ryan, I'm sorry, when you first came on, were you saying that you were coding a landscape with some degree of interactivity and things moving around?
That is the goal. I'm not quite there yet.
Uh-huh. And are you just doing it to familiarize yourself with this process, or is it for anything in particular?
Really, I was just looking for something to work on, and I started getting into watching this guy online play this game called Cities Skylines. And it was basically, it's a game where you build like a city and it simulates it, and you have to like solve all these problems you would have with a city. And the thing that was actually more fascinating to me at the beginning was actually like watching all the mechanics in that game, because the city simulation they've got is nuts. Like, they have people that walk around and cars that drive around. They like all the paths for the cars are like algorithmically determined and stuff like that. So I kind of got inspired with that and thought, it'd be fun to try to write an algorithm to do that. So that's kind of what kicked it off. Kind of random, but.
That sounds really cool. I'm looking forward to checking out that game.
Yeah.
Let's see, Ryan, if you got any thoughts. Wyatt being not a developer, yet having the ability to develop and iterate on models, and then those versions of models can change over time, on how we might have an interface where Wyatt's able to modify the models without needing to get into the code.
So maybe it would be helpful. Can you explain kind of what the end goal is?
Go for it, Wyatt.
Sure, I think Peter and I were just going back and forth on some of the things that we're interested in doing, and I like to make models and make animations. I would really like them to be interactive as soon as possible. But I said to Peter, if I wanted to create a website that just displays the world I'm creating, whether it's the entire world or just the garage within the world. Can we do that? And then is there a way that as I continue to update the file in which that world lives, which is going to be a Blender file, is there a way to make it seamlessly integrate so that any updates I make to the file, to the world, are automatically reflected in the website?
Okay. So is it one big object, or is it a bunch of objects that kind of compose together make up the whole world?
It's constantly shifting. In my perfect world, it would be one big object, but just because the files quickly become unwieldy for my computer, I will often make highly detailed, I don't know, maybe one file is just kind of a shell of a house, and then a bunch of other files are rooms of the house. So, and then I'm switching them in and out. So that's always changing. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think so. So I know one technique a lot of games use is they'll divide kind of a large world into what they call chunks. And they're kind of like smaller regions of the world. Like if you superimpose a 2D grid over like the XY plane of the world, each like grid that's like each square that's maybe like 1 unit by 1 unit is sort of an asset that is independently loadable. And the idea is when you go into the world, you're in one location, and as you move around, if you were to draw like a radius around where you're located, all the sort of chunks in that within that circle radius you have to load and show, and everything outside of that radius you can hide. And by doing it that way, it kind of allows you to only have to render a partial part of that map, which usually ends up being a lot faster. It also means that if you want your world to be infinite, I mean, I know that maybe because it's being hand generated, maybe that's not as something you'd want to do. But like in theory, that's how you could handle that, because the computer doesn't have an infinite amount of memory or an infinite amount of processing power. So if you only have to load part of it, you can make that happen. Does that make sense?
I think that does make sense. And I would like it to be infinite. Okay, that's very interesting.
I'm wondering if it's possible.
Chunking in games. That's the idea.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how universal of a term that is, but I've heard it used in that context.
Wyatt, I'm wondering if in Blender, if you're considering the way you've done exports now, that you've seen any ability to, when you've got a whole scene like you sent the garage, to export only 20% of that, like just the slice that's the leftmost slice, if you've seen that.
So you're saying, Peter, rather than just exporting individual objects, if I were able to set the exact dimensions, like grid, which part of the grid is being exported?
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, but I think that sounds very interesting.
It might be worth. So, what kind of format are the Blender files and the object files in? Because one thing you could do is if it's effectively just a big like array of coordinates or something like that for all the different vertices making up like all the polygons, you might be able to write a pretty simple algorithm to parse that and like find all the coordinates in one region and then subtract a fixed offset them to translate them to 0, 0. So like if you were to effectively split it up into that grid and chunk it up yourself.
Let's have a look at our raw files. We got one right now, a garage OBJ, and it may be susceptible to that. Here is
wow. That's pretty simple.
It's basically as described. How would that load? How would that look? I don't have any idea what it would look like to have just, I don't know, like the linear slice. Is it basically that line 4 is the very leftmost thing that loads? And
so to be clear, it wouldn't be a linear slice. Imagine you took like your object and you drew like a cube, and you got the intersection of the object and the cube, like all of the objects within that cube region.
Yep.
And you like get all the cubes that like for all the object sections that would fit into those cubes that when tessellated together form the whole object.
And so it's going to be about parsing this file and understanding where any one cube's limits are. And
yeah,
is it laid out such that there is a way to parse a cube out of this? It's not totally straightforward, because we're not exactly just pulling a cube out. And there are some, if we're looking at this wheel here, real, there's some intelligence going on that I don't know that it's just like that a grid-wise, as Wyatt shared, export may not be totally clear from the Blender point. And if it's not, it might be more like, well, there might be modifications we can make. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about this just in what I'm seeing in reality is that to have an export of just the leftmost slice here would basically be getting one car, and then an export of this as well would be getting just another car with some padding and margin. And we might be able to do that if we were laid out accurately and achieve a similar effect as getting a grid just by being clever about the design from the front. Very, very, very fun chat. And as y'all, I imagine now that my screen is not being shared, and I imagine that you're seeing a floating skull to my side there. This was the initial project that brought this collaboration together. And what you're seeing on the top right is the stars turning into some eyeballs. And those eyeballs are very meaningfully laid out. And at a point where one of them notices the skull, darts over there. So just wandering around, seeing what's happening in space. And that's what you do if you're an eyeball, you see. And at a point, one of these fellas starts to move. And there is a certain cadence that all this is happening at. What you're seeing is about 2 minute, 15-second animation. So as I'm chatting, we're not seeing the whole world of the eyes darting quickly and speeding around. It's a little bit more just easy. And then when it does move, glides over there. And with the idea that a number of the calls that I'm on during the day are quite meaningful in terms of either company direction or focus, and then can be quite, you have to be pointed on a call like that. Having this sort of thing in the background has just made some of those real words just land a little bit lighter, because how do you not have just a light experience when you got a starry night sky with a little fun background? It's been a cool thing to have it over the last couple of days. And I've also got a gym in my background too. That's just a little bit more regular. Thank you to everybody who showed up.
Peter, thank you for getting this gang together tonight. It's very interesting to hear all of you contribute.
Thanks, Peter.
Good to see you, Ozzy. And with that, we'll be posting the recording. And again, thank you for showing up. Enjoy your evening. This has been Syracuse JavaScript. We'll be back in a month talking about not Three.js. And to anybody's desire to hear or discuss anything, shoot it in the Slack. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye, Wyatt.